Good morning.
I'm blinded by the light.
So you were just telling me backstage that you were out partying with Bill Gurley last night until, you said 4 a.m.?
Bill Gurley and I share a love for Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
And so we went to a local sports bar and watched Kevin Durant miss and lose. It was a bummer.
And you also said you were hanging out with Jim Cramer last night.
Yes, Jim Cramer, who is a lot of fun to hang out with.
And he's exactly the same in person as he is, on the screen?
Yeah, there's one Jim Cramer. You get him, live on TV. It's the same thing.
Does that mean he talks? There's no conversation. It's him talking and you sort of listening.
No, he can get conversational, but he gets hysterical too. I mean, it's the same kind of,
So we have half an hour. There's a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about. If we have time, we can take questions. But I want to talk about my stuff first. We have to start with this. You recently talked about how, well, first of all, you said most venture capitalists are sheep following the herd.
It's true.
Yeah, and if other VCs are sheep, what kind of animal are you?
I may be a sheep too. I may just be, calling a spade. But I like to think that we get out ahead of trends, but a lot of people in the venture business don't. They sit back and they wait for, what becomes obvious, and then they jump on it when it becomes obvious.
And you don't. And you said
I prefer not to.
And you're one of the most successful venture capitalists. You've been doing this for a long time.
Right.
And you said that now you're making your decisions based entirely on the ridiculousnto of the name of the company?
No, I didn't say that. But what I said was that when people laugh at the idea...
Just get the quote out. You said return and ridicule are highly correlated.
Right. What I meant by that is when people laugh at the idea or they laugh at the company, they're like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. That's usually, in my mind, a good sign.
So if you're getting pitched and someone should walk in and say, this is going to be the stupidest thing you've ever heard, and immediately you're going to say, I'm listening.
Exactly. I think that'd be a great way to start off a meeting, I think.
But seriously, going back to this and forgetting the name, you talk about, in your post when you wrote about this, you quoted Gurley and Chris Dixon, and Gurley, I actually didn't realize this was his quote, but I'd heard this before, that you have to be both. You have to be right about something that other people don't think is right. Because if you're wrong, you're not going to make any money. And if you're right, you're not going to make any money if everybody else thinks you're right.
That's right. That's my point. Is the people who are sheep in the business aren't going to make a lot of money because by the time they're following the herd, everybody knows that that's the herd. Yeah.
And Dixon talked about hobbyists and the importance of that. Right. And like TechCrunch was a hobby for me when I started it, and obviously it's now a small company. But is that something that you see a high correlation to success as well?
Yeah, I think that people who are accidental entrepreneurs, they start something. Joshua Schachter at Delicious, for example, was a trader on Wall Street. He built Delicious on the side. He had a server in his closet in his apartment in New York City, and one day he couldn't handle all the people banging on the server, and he had to become an entrepreneur and start a company. And so I like that because it means that it's coming from something that's, I don't know, more authentic than just, let's come up with a good idea for a business and start one. That seems less likely to be successful.
You remember when you were doing this back in the 90s, the sort of MBA plus PowerPoint plus venture round, and then go public.
Right.
And it was sort of like in Hollywood, everybody has a script. Well, every MBA has a business plan in the 90s. Are you seeing that again as things get frothy?
Definitely.
And how do you? Are any of them good ideas, or are they mostly just no?
They all seem so derivative. Well, I'm taking sort of the Pinterest model and I'm applying it to automobiles, and then there's going to be flash sales, and it's just like, well,
I'd invest in that. That sounds kind of cool. And that's why the hobbyists are the ones. But they're sort of accidental entrepreneurs then, aren't they?
Yeah, there's lots of examples of that in our portfolio where people didn't realize that they were building a business. David Karp at Tumblr, for example, he was doing consulting, and he and Marco built Tumblr on the side, and it just became so popular that they bagged their consulting stuff and went and worked on it full time.
Yeah. All right. Second topic. I Before I was a VC, I was an entrepreneur. I'd raised money for a couple of companies back in the day. And I thought I kind of knew how raising money worked. You go in, you'd get the partner to agree to a partner meeting, you go and sit in a room, very nice room always, with projectors and nice drinks, and you'd have some subset or all the partners in there, and you'd talk, and usually for half an hour to an hour. And I thought, the key thing is to keep everyone engaged, they're listening, they're not leaving and all that, and everything's gonna be great. Now I realize on the other side of the table that almost every idea I had about raising money and the process of going through the VC process was wrong. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about this, because see if you share some of these opinions.
Well, I think what you need to do is you need to get people engaged in a conversation as quickly as possible. And what people want to do is they want to come in and they want to present something, and they got 10 slides or 15 slides or 20 slides. They want to get through the slides. And the reality is, if you only get through one slide because the partnership hijacks the conversation, and then you're that's the best thing that could ever happen.
And I always thought that was the worst, and I know that now too, but it's like, I gotta get through these 45 slides, including the, and if it's dead silence on the other end, it's not because they're sitting there with rapt attention, it's because they're just out of their minds, bored and waiting to, get out.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, and so, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like some of the worst things people do in VC pitches. I think it's this audience really needs to hear this.
Well,
and also some of the best things.
So I think going through a really long backstory is a bad idea. Well, in 1972, I graduated from college, and then in my first job, I did this, and 20 minutes later, they're getting to the point where they started the company, and people do that, and
they do it all the time. Yeah,
it's just
and you can't cut them off because they're talking about their formative teenage years, and how important their grandmother was, and it's just like, I don't fucking care. I might care later, but it's like, I don't need to know all this when and it's really hard to cut it off, right?
Right, so I prefer someone to come in and make sort of a really bold, audacious statement right off the bat. Like I'm doing the stupidest thing in the world. Like, that would actually be refreshing for me. But Jeff Lawson, the founder of Twilio, when he pitched us for the first time, he came in and he said, I've taken the entire world of telephony, all that ugly stuff that no one wants to know about, and I've reduced it to 5 API calls.
This is the first thing he said to you.
First thing he said, 5 API calls. Yeah. I said, no way. He said, yeah, call, message, store, what they were. Yeah. And I just couldn't believe it. Like, for the next 20 minutes, I was interrogating him on that.
So he hooked you. He hooked you with that, and then you actually were paying attention.
Yeah, and then he reeled me in.
What are some other examples?
That's a very good analogy, by the way. Hook the person and then reel them in.
Yeah. You also talked about SoundCloud?
Yeah. So I was just talking about the power of one slide, right? Instead of having 30 slides, if you could just do one, just think about if there was just one slide that could describe the opportunity. What Alex Leung did was he had one slide, and it had, video, YouTube, blog posts, WordPress, status updates, Twitter, photos, Facebook, and then he said audio, SoundCloud. That was his slide. Yeah. And I looked at it and I was like, that's an interesting business. I want to invest in that.
Yeah. So can we go back to some of the bad things people do, though?
Yeah, they also talk about their product for 20 or 30 minutes, and they never show you the product. Yeah. It's better to show you the product and then talk about the product, because then at least you have the context to understand what the person's talking about.
Is it hard for you to invest when there is no product? Because there's I need your money, and then I'm going to build this product.
We're not good at that. We've made a bunch of investments in companies that didn't have a product yet, and some of them have worked out, but more often than not, those have been our least worst performing investments.
Yeah, so if you're going to come to you, you need to have, you really need to have a product, something to show.
I think we are better. Union Square Ventures is better investing in companies that have a product.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the backstory thing kills me, and I don't think people realize it. They come in and it's 25 minutes, and they say, let me just start off by telling you a little bit about myself. And for some reason, they think that's important right at the start. It's software that doesn't work is the worst, or that they just haven't built it yet.
Right.
What's worse? Depends on how it's broken, right?
Yeah, I had a meeting yesterday with an entrepreneur, and the product didn't work, and it was tough, when he's sitting there, looking at your phone, and it's not doing what it's supposed to do. That's a painful moment.
So
for everybody. Painful for me too, by the way.
If you're an entrepreneur and you're pitching you for money, and some of the people in this room at some point will probably be one-on-one with you, what are the signs that things are going well, or what's a sign that they should adjust?
You know, it's the classic. I guess I'll steal a line from Sheryl Sandberg. Lean in. If the person you're talking to is leaning in and into it, then it's going well. And if they're kind of leaning back and not saying anything, it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be some kind of back and forth, questions, interest, yeah.
I think it's all about getting a conversation going. That's my opinion. If you can't get the other side talking to you about what you're saying, then you're not succeeding.
So what are you interested in right now? What are the kinds of startups that you'd like to see?
We are very interested in new forms of payment and money. So I've written a lot about digital currencies, and also, we're interested in, to me, money is information. It's bits on a wire, right? There's no reason why financial transactions have to cost as much as they do. So we have an investment in a company called Dwala, for example, that is all about avoiding 3.5% fees every time you do a transaction. If I'm sending you money, why should it cost me anything or you anything? We should just be able to move money, without paying anybody. And so that whole area, I think, is still very much up for grabs. I mean, there's lots of interesting companies. You've got Square, you've got Stripe, you've got Braintree, but I just think that there's still way, way more to do in that category. So that's very interesting to us. I still love marketplaces. We announced yesterday an investment in a company called Science Exchange, which is a marketplace for people who are doing research in universities and laboratories. And just the whole marketplace model, whether it's ride sharing like Lyft and Sidecar, or scientists in universities, or funding on Kickstarter, or arts and crafts on Etsy, or whatever. I think that so much of how we conduct our lives and do business in the world is moving to a marketplace model. And we're seeing new and interesting ones every single day. And that's an old theme. I mean, it goes back to eBay and Craigslist, almost 20 years ago now, and I still think it's got lots of legs.
You're talking about, again, randomly backstage, you're talking about the street.com. It started with the Jim Cramer discussion,
right.
And you talked about how they were doing these amazing things that you as the investors talked them into stopping, and you think they could have been much more successful.
Yeah, don't listen to your investor. The lesson to this little story is don't listen to your investors. Jim was basically live blogging, almost tweeting, 30, 40 posts a day in 1996 from his trading desk. And the street.com was basically, he hired some people to build the tools to allow him to do that, because there was no blogging software, there was no Twitter at the time. And we came in and we said, let's turn this into the Wall Street Journal. We hired journalists, and it's a good company. I don't mean to say that we got a bad result, but I think what we missed was the whole idea that there was a new way to create media on the internet that was much more native and much more real time, and real people doing real work, talking about what they were doing, as opposed to some journalists reporting on it.
And even though it was happening, you didn't see it.
It was hard to see. I mean, Jim was doing it, but I don't know, we just didn't see the power of that model as a business.
Yes. Have you learned something from that, where today, when you see your companies do weird things, that you step back and say, is there something I'm not seeing here? Or
Well, one, I think we are much more willing to let the entrepreneur win these kinds of conversations. And David Karp, for example, at Tumblr, when we first invested, I said, why doesn't Tumblr have comments? And he said, comments suck. I hate comments. And I said, well, all the other blogging software has comments. He goes, not mine. And you know what? It worked out fine for him.
You let him leave out the comments.
No, I didn't let him, but I stopped arguing with him after a while, as I realized, maybe he knows more than I do.
14 years ago, you would have probably said, this has to be this way.
I think venture capitalists as a whole, me for sure, but I think venture capitalists as a whole were a lot more kind of prescriptive with entrepreneurs 15, 20 years ago. And I think, we've seen, I think again and again, that The best entrepreneurs are the ones who, they'll listen to you, but they won't take orders from you. And they're the ones who succeed. The ones who say, what should I do next? Then you know you're in trouble.
The company that you were talking about yesterday, which we won't say the name of the company, but I know that founder because we talked about who it was, and he's a certain kind of crazy. And have you ever thought about this in terms of you clearly want someone who's a little off, a little crazy, but where's that line between good crazy and bad crazy?
Well, you don't want a psychopath, and no, but it happens. I mean, that's where the line is, right? Like, you want somebody who is crazy but mentally healthy, right? And the difference is
well, then you wouldn't have invested in, say, Walt Disney then.
Was Walt Disney a psychopath?
Well, you said mentally healthy. I would say that there's some suggestions. I mean, some of the things he did would suggest he absolutely wasn't mentally healthy.
Well, I might have invested in Walt Disney, but I don't think when you make the investment that somebody is mentally unstable. That reveals itself to you after the fact.
You don't want somebody who's going to be a criminal.
Definitely not a criminal.
But sort of one step below that they're, right? Because some of the guys, I mean, we know them. They're some of the most successful people in our industry are just a little off, right?
Yeah,
and it's like, if you look at all your top hits over the last 5 years, the CEO or founder of every one of those is probably a little off.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's, it's to see things differently than other people see them and to have the courage to know you're right requires somebody to be wired up a little differently, I think.
And so when, I guess what I'm asking is, you meet someone, you're like, they're crazy, but it's kind of cool. They've got the right name, it's a crazy name, it's a crazy idea, and then you go, they're a little too crazy. Like, how often does that happen?
It happens, but usually we don't figure that out before we make the investment.
Who's the craziest person you've invested in? Good crazy.
Well, Perry Chen, who's the founder of Kickstarter, I had an email with one of the people on the Kickstarter team about something, and about the fourth message back was, well, there's the Kickstarter way and there's the regular way. Like they just do things differently at Kickstarter.
So he's crazier than Mark Pinkus? Because he's crazy.
Perry and Mark have some common traits.
The crazy part.
They both are very competitive, and they both want to do things the way they want to do them. Yeah. And I think it has served them both very well, actually.
Yeah. Jack Dorsey?
Jack has become more assertive in getting what he wants. I think Jack found himself in the early days of Twitter not realizing that he could be more assertive. Yeah. And it was tough because it was Ev's company, but he was running it.
How crazy is Ev, by the way?
I don't think Ev is that crazy. Ev is super creative. I think Ev is very normal, but hyper creative.
Okay. Whereas Pinkus is creative, but crazy.
Pinkus.
I am going somewhere with this, by the way.
Pinkus can drive me crazy.
So you said there were a couple people where, that you didn't realize till after you invested that they were, maybe criminally crazy. Who were some of those people?
I can't name names. You're talking about me accusing somebody of being criminal.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I have the names in my mind. I can see their faces, but I'm not going to name them.
Yeah. Maybe I could ESP, and if I guess, then no.
No. I probably wouldn't finger them.
It's bullshit. You're always wanting to say the good guy. You're like, this guy's great. But then, you and everyone else doesn't want to say it when.
Well, look, we have responsibilities to the companies that we've invested in, and we really shouldn't be publicly trashing the people who run them or the companies.
You shouldn't be calling them crazy at all, right?
I think crazy is a compliment. I just said that. I think you make money with people who are crazy.
I think we have a few minutes to take some questions if you'd like.
That's fine. Let's do that.
Right. Do we have microphones? I don't think we do, right? Yeah. We do. Are they up here in front? Oh, why don't you come on and walk up to the microphone? If you have a question, we probably have time for 3.
We only have 5 minutes left?
Yeah, we talked about the crazy stuff a long time. Yeah.
Jesus.
Go ahead.
Hi, Fred. You once said that you would invest in anything I hated. And I asked you, I said, don't invest in Canvas. And I'm just wondering if you still have that same opinion. And then also about Foursquare, what you think, how they're going to come out of the period they're in now, which they referred to yesterday as the hazing period.
Well, I'm not going to say anything negative about any of our companies, but Canvas has pivoted to DrawQuest, and that seems to be working pretty well for them. And I think Foursquare is doing great. Dennis was here yesterday, and the new version of Foursquare is growing faster than I'd say most mobile apps that we have in our portfolio right now. And I think Dennis has actually gotten through what I think is probably the hardest thing that you can do in a company, which is to turn a product into a business. And that process is very difficult. And they're at the back end of that now. And I think that it reminds me a lot of where Twitter was a few years ago, where they were desperately trying to turn it from a product into a business, and there was a lot of growing pains, but they got through it, and they're doing great now. And I think Foursquare is pretty much on the same trajectory.
Hey Fred, I liked your comment on marketplaces. I moved from San Francisco to Singapore to build a B2C marketplace, which is showing great signs. Do you have a view on investing in Asia, in Southeast Asia specifically?
We don't do that. We don't invest anywhere in Asia. I imagine that there's lots of interesting opportunities there. There's not a lot of venture capital that I'm aware of in Southeast Asia. So suggest to me that might be a good place to be an investor, but I don't know a lot about the local market there.
Have you've never really even invested outside of New York that much, right?
Well, that's not actually true. So we have, let's call it 55.
It's not true or is true?
It's not true.
Okay.
We have, say, 55 portfolio companies. Maybe 15 plus are in the Bay Area, and probably a dozen in Europe. And then we've got companies in Des Moines, Iowa, Kansas City. We've got companies in Toronto and Waterloo and Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. So
do you fly there for board meetings, or do you make them fly to New York for board meetings?
I like to go to the companies.
So you go to Europe for board meetings, in Des Moines?
Well, Albert's on the board of Dwala, which is in Des Moines, and he and I have been to Des Moines a couple times, but he goes to those board meetings.
What's it like there?
It's like a Midwest city. It reminds me a lot of Minneapolis. It's a similar kind of place.
What's that like?
Cold in the winter, beautiful in the summer.
Yeah, there's that whole middle America. I can't even quite place. Des Moines is in Iowa.
Correct.
Not Idaho. I have no idea where Iowa is. I have no idea.
Iowa's right smack in the middle of the United States. Like it's literally like
Why don't you just say I'm Fred fucking Wilson? Like move to New York.
Why would we do that? That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. Are there any more questions? Oh, sorry, I was just going on.
Yeah, hey, so you talked about the fact that you're letting entrepreneurs sort of run with their ideas a little more than you did 12, 15 years ago. Are there still times when you feel like it's appropriate for you to step in and rein in one of the heads of your companies? Could you give an example?
Yeah,
Give examples. Yeah,
when it's not working, right? When it's just definitely not working, I think it is our job as investors to confront the team and just show them, hey, I love your enthusiasm, I love your passion, your belief, but here's the facts.
But this has to end, yeah. And then who have you steered? Even in a good way, have you steered away from certain disaster?
I don't know that we've steered anybody away from certain disaster, but our portfolio is full of companies who've pivoted. Mike Yavenditti, who was the CEO of Quigo and runs a company called YieldMo now. We invested in his company, and he pivoted twice before pivoting into YieldMo, and I think he's finally got to the right place. But I don't know that we pushed Mike to pivot. I think actually he pivoted before we even thought it was the right thing to do. We got plenty of companies in our portfolio that have, made multiple pivots.
One more question.
Do you have any sort of secret question to figure out if the founder is good crazy, like Paul Graham has, hack in the real world systems?
Yeah, I was trying to ask that earlier. Like, how do you figure it out? You looking for nervous tics, or is it?
I mean, I'm a big believer in the power of a conversation and multiple conversations and multiple meetings and just getting to know the people. And I think people reveal themselves over time. The challenge in the venture business is sometimes you don't have a lot of time to make an investment decision. And sometimes we will just back away if something's coming together too quickly and we don't have the time to get comfortable. We'll just back away and say, hey, we just can't move this quickly. I think a lot of people in the business aren't willing to do that. It's really important. There's a lot of
Fred?
people in the venture business who yep.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I think he's asking a different question, which is let's say he or his friend or something. It's like, I know I'm crazy. I just don't actually know if I'm bad crazy or good crazy. Like, what is it I need to do to hide the bad crazy if I am bad crazy?
I didn't ask that.
It's that. So he confirmed. That's what he asked. So it's to have an actual conversation with you.
Yeah, you got to be. I think people who are genuinely mentally unstable will reveal that to you over time. And if you have enough time, it will get revealed before you write the check.
Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Sorry, how do you get enough time with all the founders? Because you're probably overwhelmed enough.
Well, we try to, spend time with them. We go out and see them and hang out with them and bring them to New York and hang out with them. And
If you're spending a lot of time with them, it means you're interested, obviously, right?
Correct.
It's not like you're going to invite everyone over for the weekend to stay with your family, but
we're only going to spend time with a team and a founder if we want to make the investment.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.